Institute Up Close. I'm your host, Stephen Heiner, and with us is the superior of the Institute, His Excellency Bishop Donald Sanborn. Hello, Your Excellency.
Hello.
We're going to continue on with our theological directory. I wholeheartedly reject the heretical teaching of Vatican II concerning the unity of the Church, namely that the Church of Christ is not exclusively identified with the Catholic Church, but merely subsists in it. This heretical doctrine is contained principally in Lumen Gentium, and its heretical meaning is confirmed in statements of Paul VI and his successors, particularly in the 1983 Code of Canon Law, in the 1992 Statement concerning Church and Communion, and in the Ecumenical Directory. It is contrary to the teaching of the Catholic Church, contained principally in Satis Cognitum of Pope Leo XIII, Mortalium Animos of Pope Pius XI, Mystici Corporis of Pope Pius XII, and in the condemnations of the branch theory made by the Holy Office under Pope Pius IX. You were reading, I was reading this sort of list of errors, and then, yes, Satis Cognitum, yes, Mortalium Animos, yes, Mystici Corporis, of happy memory, back when encyclicals were something you'd look forward to reading.
Yes, and not dread. Yes.
I reject the teaching of Vatican II concerning ecumenism as overtly heretical, which states that non-Catholic religions are a means of salvation. This doctrine directly contradicts the teaching of the Church that there is no salvation outside the Catholic Church, which doctrine was called by Pope Pius IX a notissimum Catholicum dogma. In addition, the ecumenical practices which have resulted from this heretical doctrine are directly contrary to Mortalium Animos of Pope Pius XI, some might say a countersyllabus.
Yes, absolutely.
I also reject the teaching of Vatican II on religious liberty contained in Dignitatis Humanae, which nearly word for word asserts the very doctrine which was condemned by Pope Pius VII in Postam Diuturnas, by Pope Gregory XVI in Morarivos, by Pope Pius IX in Quanto Cura, and by Pope Leo XIII in Libertas Praestantissimum. The teaching of Vatican II on religious liberty also contradicts the royalty of Jesus Christ in society as expressed in Quas Primas of Pope Pius XI and the constant attitude and practice of the Church with regard to civil society. Once again, a hit list of wonderful encyclicals. Mm-hmm. I moreover reject the teaching of Vatican II concerning collegiality, which attempts to alter the monarchical constitution of the Catholic Church, with which she was endowed by the Divine Savior. The doctrine of Vatican II, confirmed by the 1983 Code of Canon Law, which states that the subject of the supreme authority of the Church is the College of Bishops, together with the Pope, is contrary to the defined doctrine of the Council of Florence and the Vatican Council of 1870. As I'm reading these, Your Excellency, it once again goes back to this problem of, it's not this question of, Vatican II is a pastoral council, it didn't define anything. It talks about things which are directly contrary to the Catholic faith: ecumenism, religious liberty, and collegiality. It's all there.
Yeah, Lumen Gentium, which has the heresy concerning collegiality and also the subsisted in heresy, is called a dogmatic constitution. It is titled a dogmatic constitution. So the whole idea of a pastoral council is absurd. Every council in the history of the Church had some pastoral aspects to it. It's as if the pastoral excludes the dogma or the dogma excludes the pastoral. And John the 23rd was very clear that the question of doctrine was not excluded. He said it should confirm the doctrines of the Church, etc. It wasn't just a meeting to discuss how we're going to make the catechism more interesting or something like that. You see, that's another attempt to somehow escape the problem of Vatican II and the Vatican II popes, that, well, it was just pastoral, so we don't have to pay attention to it, which is not even true, because even if they enact pastoral things, you must pay attention to that because they have the authority of Christ, if they are popes. See, but they try to escape that way, and it's just false.
Someone might say trying to save the baby.
Save the baby, yes. In other words, it's because they are conscious of the Catholic notion that the Pope is the living rule of faith, and that conformity to what he teaches and what he enacts is absolutely necessary for your eternal salvation. That is a Catholic principle. And so seeing him as the Pope, they start to writhe in all sorts of turmoil. How do we somehow explain this when he is clearly doing things contrary to Catholic faith and practice.
I adhere to the Catholic liturgy of the Roman Rite, pristine and untouched by liturgical modernists. Consequently, I reject the Ordo Missae of Paul VI as an evil liturgical discipline because 1, it contains a heretical definition of the Mass. 2, it was composed with the express purpose of making an ecumenical liturgy, pleasing to Protestants, stripped of Catholic truths concerning the priesthood, the holy sacrifice of the Mass, and the real presence of Christ in the Holy Eucharist. 3, it was composed with the help and input of 6 Protestant ministers, which shows the heretical spirit in which it was conceived and formulated. 4, its authors systematically deleted from its prayers and lessons doctrines which would be offensive to heretics. 5, it teaches both by its omissions and its symbolism and gestures, heresies and errors concerning the priesthood, the holy sacrifice of the Mass, and the real presence of Christ in the Holy Eucharist. 6, it is most probably invalid owing to a defect of intention, which it causes in him who celebrates it, inasmuch as the Reformed Missal refers to the essential words of consecration as an, quote, institution narrative. As I was reading through those points, Your Excellency, I was thinking of chapters of Father Cicada's book, and I thought, that's addressed, that's addressed,
Yes,
that's
yes.
addressed. And that, I suppose I would just tell people, if you're listening to all these assertions that we're making, you can just read Father Cicada's book, and that covers all this.
Father, he did a very good job in showing the systematic removal from the prayers of the Mass anything offensive to Protestants, anything that was considered negative theology like mortification or detachment from the world, etc. He did a wonderful job with that, and it was painstaking. He went through every single oration, comparing them to the traditional, comparing the traditional to the new, and that book is really a landmark book. I mean, the one Novus Ordo priest told me that his friend had read it, also a Novus Ordo priest, and his comment was, "Oh my God." That was his comment. Yes, that's all you can say. I mean, when you read it, it's, and everything is referenced, so you can go and find out if you want to prove what Father Cicada says. It's all referenced. I mean, I'm so glad that he got that done before he died. Because it would be a very difficult thing to do. He said it took him 30 years to do it because he had been researching for 30 years.
It started at the seminary, right? That
Yes.
he was teaching the classes, and he needed to have those.
But even before that, he was a student of liturgy, and so it really is a wonderful contribution to everything that we're saying.
Well, and as you noted, as he went through the orations, and actually that booklet to Problems in the Prayers of the Modern Mass was one of the germs of the book, that it shows you how surgical they were. They went into everything. They didn't leave anything untouched. Oh no, that's an allusion to hell. We've got to remove that. Oh no,
Right.
intercession of the saints. We've got to remove that. And they were serious about their work. They went in there and they got it done.
Yes, that's always a classic sign of heretics. They go first for the liturgy and they start pulling out things that they disagree with. That's a sure sign of a heretic. And when I say Mass and I read some of these orations, I think, oh, this one would never have survived in the new missal. I mean, this is, I can tell when they are saying very Catholic things, and that would have to go.
Yeah, when you think about those post-communions, just a catechism in a sentence,
Yes.
and the beauty of the Roman liturgy, how it's able to boil down these ideas into these beautiful small phrases. And I feel, unfortunately, as lay people, we sometimes miss. We're in our devotions or whatever else it might be, but you have to read them all the time so that we can have
like any reference to the enemies of the church, St. Pius V or St. Robert Bellarmine, those orations, I mean, those had to go. See, the church has no enemies.
Right. We're all friendly.
We're all
today.
one.
I reject the Vatican II reforms of the other sacraments which participate in the same spirit of ecumenical apostasy. Notable among these is the Vatican II Rite of Orders, which has deleted the notion of a sacrificing priesthood and has changed the form of the sacrament from that set down by Pope Pius XII in Sacramentum Ordinis, and the 1968 Rite of Episcopal Consecration, the essential words of which fail to indicate the essence of the Catholic episcopacy, reducing it to merely a jurisdiction to found local churches. Once again, thinking of Father Cicada.
Yes, he did that work too. He was very good. And we miss him terribly, not only for his research, but also for his sense of humor.
I also reject the reforms of the Missal and Breviary made in 1955 and thereafter because they were designed and concocted by the same Annibale Bugnini, the author of the Ordo Missae of Paul VI. When seen in the subsequent light of the ultimate reforms of Vatican II, it is clear that the 1955 reforms of the Mass and of Holy Week in particular are inchoately the same reforms as those of Vatican II. I hold that the legal justification for the rejection of these rites, which were promulgated by a true Roman pontiff, is the principle of epikeia, since if there were a pope reigning at the present time, it is reasonable to presume that he would not want those inchoative changes to be used by the church. To once again use a Bishop Sanborn airplane analogy, if I don't consent to the destination, then I wouldn't get on the plane in the first place.
That's right. Yes. Or as St. Thomas says, if you consent to the beginning, you consent to the end. And as Father Cicada, first of all, Bugnini, that's what I call him, Bugnini, he said that those changes in 1955 of the Holy Week were a bridge to the future changes in Vatican II. He said they wrote a big book on the Vatican II changes. And as Father Cicada said, if we don't want to get to the other side, why would we cross the bridge?
We wouldn't even look at the bridge.
We wouldn't. We would shut it down. We'd blow it up.
I adhere to the 1917 Code of Canon Law. I consequently reject the 1983 Code of Canon Law because, 1, it is promulgated by John Paul II, a false pope, who has no jurisdiction to make any laws for the Catholic Church owing to his promulgation of the Vatican II heresies and errors. 2, it contains the heresy of Vatican II concerning the Church mentioned above. 3, it permits sacrilege to the Blessed Sacrament by approving of its reception by non-Catholics, which is a mortal sin. 4, it permits communicatio in sacris with non-Catholics, which is a mortal sin.
Yes.
I hold that the only solution to the problem of Vatican II is to condemn it as a false council which was dominated by heretics and to discard and ignore its decrees and enactments. Consequently, I do not seek to be recognized by the heretical hierarchy which promulgates Vatican II, nor do I seek to work with the Novus Ordo clergy or to consider myself co-religionists with them. I repudiate the idea of celebrating the traditional Mass under the auspices of the Novus Ordo hierarchy, as well as the notion of a group or fraternity of priests which has received permission or seeks permission from the Novus Ordo hierarchy to function in communion with the modernist heretics. Well, that's not very nice, Your Excellency. That sounds kind of rigid.
I'm plenty rigid. I was always accused of being rigid, even when I was in the modernist seminary. I was told I was rigid, and that adjective has been used about me quite a bit. And another famous traditionalist bishop said he's like granite.
And I can attest to that myself, watchers and listeners. I hold that in addition to the sacrament of baptism, there is baptism of blood. Oh, we have to watch out here. People are going to zoom into the comments. Whereby an unbaptized person is justified by means of a bloody martyrdom for the Catholic faith. I furthermore hold that there is a baptism of desire, whereby an unbaptized person can achieve justification if, 1, through no fault of his own, he cannot receive the sacrament of baptism. 2, he desires the sacrament of baptism at least implicitly. 3, by the grace of God, he receives supernatural faith and supernatural charity. 4, that he explicitly believes some truths of the Catholic faith, at the very least that God exists and that he rewards those who seek him. 5, he has perfect contrition for his sins.
Yes, that is baptism of desire. That's the definition of it. Yes.
Finally, I hold that the traditional Latin Mass, which is offered together with Una Cum, the Novus Ordo hierarchy, is objectively sacrilegious. Consequently, I affirm that active participation in masses or services in which the name of a Novus Ordo hierarch is mentioned is objectively a mortal sin. And we noted some time ago that people said, well, Bishop Sanborn did that in illo tempore. What about that? And you had mentioned that at the time you were an opinionist and that you have changed on this issue.
Yes, as I said, in 1973, I became a sedevacantist, and when Archbishop Lefebvre around 1980 insisted that everybody name John Paul II in the canon, in a big long discussion with him, he made it clear that he would like me to do that, and because I was an opinionist at the time, Bishop Kelly was, and I think still is, an opinionist, that the fact that he would say, the fact that he is not the Pope is a theological opinion. I said, well, if he wants me to do this, I will do this. In other words, I can abandon my opinion in order to please him, which is perfectly legitimate in moral theology, by the way. And I found it in actually a dogma book, that is something you could do. Because an opinion means this, that you hold to one thing with the fear that the opposite may be true. See, so you could consider the opposite perhaps to be true, you see. So that's why I made that change, to please Archbishop Lefebvre, and I think that it shows, we're often accused of having opposed the Archbishop. We did everything that we could to try to keep the thing together, and that was one of the things I wanted to do. But, I mean, if I had thought then what I think now, after all of the research that I have done, I would obviously not have done that. And I respect Father Guépin, the deceased Father Guépin, and the others in France, who did not hold it as an opinion, the sedevacantist, and they said, no, we can't do that, and they got kicked out for that. So I respect them, but I was operating under a different principle, and so...
I at the time I was probably 2, 3, 4 years old. I can't imagine that Father because I've only ever known Bishop Sanborn. I don't
Yes.
Father Sanborn who would accept that as a possibility. But I think it's helpful for our watchers or our listeners to see that you don't figure out everything all at once. That
Not
it
at
is,
all.
as you say, it's a train.
It's a train
with many
transportation, yes.
with many stops, and that sometimes you make stops that you look back later and say, wow, I really shouldn't have done that. As you know, Father Guépin didn't, others didn't, and that you had to learn, and you progressed from that, and you admitted that it was wrong, and now you've written one of the strongest articles against opinionism, I think, that can be found on the internet.
Yes, yeah. You see, the 1980 or 80, yes, Archbishop Lefebvre came to an agreement with the priests at Oyster Bay, who said, we will keep quiet about it in the pulpit, but we will retain it as a private opinion, and we won't mention his name in the canon. That was the agreement. And Archbishop Lefebvre went along with that, and I think they still observe that, actually. But because he's made his famous statement at that point, I don't say that the Pope is not the Pope, but I don't say either that one cannot say that he's not the Pope. So even he entertained it privately, obviously. He would not have said that, And so he was pleased with that. So in other words, I would say that even the others, in giving into that, in other words, they did not hold it as an absolute either. In other words, that they would keep quiet about it, etc. Because if the man is not the Pope, you obviously have to say it. You see? So, I think there was, if you're an opinionist, you can go either way on that without offending the truth, actually, because you're expressing that there's doubt about what you think, there's doubt about what the other side thinks, and you could go either way, and that's why it's such a dangerous thing. And it really is not a matter of opinion because all of the motives are completely clear. The reason why they were, I think, saying it was an opinion is because there's a difference of opinion among Catholic theologians, traditional Catholic theologians of the past, of what to do with a pope who falls into heresy. And gradually I realized, as I talked to priests in Europe, that the question is not the personal sin of heresy of these popes, but rather that they're teaching the heresy, and that engages the infallibility and indefectibility of the church. So then it becomes something that flows from dogma, and therefore is not an opinion. See, I discovered that later. That was the next stop on the train, you see. But, we talked together in America, and Bishop Kelly, who was very influential with all of us, said, it's a matter of opinion, a matter of opinion. It's a theological opinion. Okay. See?
Right, and you've changed, and he hasn't.
That I know of, I think they still say it's a theological opinion. I think so, but they're very closed and quiet, so I don't know what they think.
Yeah, someone has said it's a walled city with no gate.
Yes, but I know one of them said to me, this was years ago, even though he was an opinionist, he said, I would sooner die than mention that man's name in the canon, which doesn't sound like an opinion
to me. So the Theological Directory ends, all these things I hold to be certain and true. There follows the signatures of the member and of the Superior General.
Yes.
Well, listeners, that's the end of the Theological Directory. We're going to continue on in our future episodes with the Liturgical Directory and the Pastoral Directory. As always, Your Excellency, thank you for your time.
Thank you.